Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Appreciate you stopping by. Today we got a little truck video for you. We're going to be doing a few things, getting rid of a few things, and adding a little bit of cheap insurance to this rig here. It is the hottest day of the year down here in South Alabama. So far, heat index is up to 109. So I have conned my dad into letting me use his big, nice, air-conditioned shop. So let's dig in. So the meat and potatoes is what we're going to be doing today. I have a couple things we can do, but first and foremost, I've got a disaster prevention kit from S&S Diesel. And we'll talk about what that is and why I'm doing it here in just a minute. And then I also have a CCV crankcase ventilation filter delete kit from SPE, Speed Lab, I believe is the name of it. So that's the two main things I want to do. I also have a case of automatic transmission fluid. I'm just now realizing I left the filter at home, but that's okay. I probably wasn't going to be doing that today anyways. All right, so we're going to work these two projects in tandem, kind of. So right here, this crankcase ventilation filter delete or reroute. So on these trucks, there is a little crankcase filter that tends to want to plug up and build up pressure, and you can end up pushing oil out past your rear main seal. And also it routes that dirty, nasty crankcase vapors back into the intake of your truck, and it coats the whole intake, the turbo, gets everything covered in oil and nasty. Along with this kit, I got you can get an internal or external catch can. I went for the internal version, so I don't have to worry about taking it off and draining it. But we'll look at it a little closer when we get into it. And then here, this disaster prevention kit from S&S. What this is doing is, I've talked about it before, the CP4 high pressure fuel pump on these trucks. They use the same fuel that it's pumping into the injectors for lubrication. That CP4 is like a little piston pump, and so it's got a little camshaft in it, and it uses that same fuel to lubricate itself that it's pumping into the engine. So with today's ultra low sulfur diesel specs, the diesel fuel is not as lubricous as it used to be. So a lot of people run additives and stuff, and I do as well, but these pumps have a tendency to grenade themselves and come apart, and that can really screw up your fuel system bad, like north of $10,000 in repairs if you were to take it to somebody. So this kit here basically cuts in an extra Donaldson filter here and reroutes that fuel, so it uses separate fuel to lubricate itself than what is getting pumped to the injectors. And it also cuts the return line from your fuel system through this filter as well. And this will all make more sense when we get into it. I think I have my microphone off. I was going to take this pipe from the hot side pipe, I believe they call it, from the turbo to the intercooler, but I can't quite reach it, this back nut, or this band clamp back here. So I'm gonna start zapping off this plastic intake first and see if I can't get a little room. I need a little more light on the subject. I'm trying to get this dipstick oil, engine oil dipstick out of the way. These are 10 mils. I'll tell you what, I got this 120 tooth 1/4 inch ratchet. This thing is saving the day. It's so tight back in here. See another one back here. Let's see. I finally got these dang transmission and engine oil filter dipstick loose. Man, them bolts and nuts were tight back there working up under that firewall. I'm gonna go set these to the side. It was 2 bolts, one holding the 2 dipsticks together, one holding to a bracket on the engine oil dipstick, and then one nut on the engine oil dipstick up at the front here. I'm gonna go set those to the side so I don't get them confused with anything else. I tell you, there are quite a few bolts holding on this intake manifold. Yeah, okay. So one nut, the dipstick went up there, and then a nut on top of that, and then the bottom side is a bolt holding in the intake. So before I finish getting all the bolts out of this plastic intake right here, this tube right here comes from the EGR cooler back to the intake. And since this engine's still really hot from me driving it over here, I'm gonna go ahead and crack these bolts loose and make sure they come loose before this thing cools off too much. Kind of like when you can't get a bolt to move and you apply some heat. I'm just using the heat from it heat soaking from the engine driving over here, so these don't seize up on us and we snap a bolt. So far, coming off nice and, oh well, okay then. So far, I think I've spent half my time retrieving tools. All right, we got it. Come on. Got her. Universal joint or some wobble sockets is a must for this job. Also, this whole plastic piece, this upper intake and this lower intake are coming out. So unplug any electrical connections you see. This one, I believe, this came off this sensor right here. I'm sure it's some type of airflow sensor, maybe the mass airflow sensor or something like that. So I unplugged it and got it tucked back. Any coolant hoses fixed to it. This one was broke already. I just pulled it off to the side. So I finally think I got all the bolts out of this upper intake housing here. There's two pretty far deep off in the back. You got to reach. I unclipped this plastic piece just so I could have enough room to get my hand in there, and you got to use a little universal joint to be able to get those. I mean, it's really tight. The other kind of nuance about this is there is a piece down here, kind of like that bolt nut combo that held the oil tube dipstick. You have to have a deep well 8mm to get that. You ain't gonna be able to get it with anything else. You can't fit a wrench. I don't even know if they have a crow's foot that small. I don't even know if you could get it down in there. But 8mm deep well, get it right off. So I think this was about 14 or 15 8mm, 210 and 112mm. And I have a 2019 model truck here. So I think I finally, oh yeah, finally got all the bolts here. I have no idea how to snake this baby out of here. Maybe like this. There you go. Now that we got that upper intake out of the way, we'll go ahead and try and see if I can't get this turbo pipe. I think they call this the hot side pipe. Yeah, there we go. Full of oil. I'm sure that's the way it's supposed to be. Getting all kinds of room in here now. I'm gonna carry on getting this EGR cooler pipe out of here. So this has some kind of little sensor on it. Let's see. My wire's hung up. Now I'm gonna try and get this charge air pipe off the throttle body. Kind of an odd little clip. Comes right off of there. Suppose now we're working on pulling this lower intake piece. There's a connector right here on your throttle body for the throttle position sensor. Man, I can get my hand in there. But I see it now, it's one of those little connectors with the red safety on there, so I had to use a little 90-degree pick to get in there and pop that loose. There it goes. Whew. That was a pain. So now I think all it should be is 3 bolts, 10 millimeters, holding in this lower intake piece. Long one, short one. All right, these two are the same size. One long one on the driver's side. Okay, now with our pipes out of the way. Oh! Crankcase ventilation filter is hooked right here. Oh, came right off. That's part of the reason I'm doing these jobs at the same time. It's going to be some of the same stuff having to come apart. Oh, I almost forgot. It's an intake. I have to get it off the turbo there. Feeding our turbo. Now I think we're ready to come up out of here. There we go. So I just got I went ahead and took the fuel filter out, and this is the little holder that the fuel filter sits in. It was 3 8mm bolts. The 2 long ones went on the driver's side, and the shorter one went right here on the passenger line, and it held the fuel lines were tied in right here. A little clip ran through and secured them as well. So most everything up to this point has just been for the disaster prevention kit that we're going to install. But with all this room that we have now, we got plenty of access to start getting this crankcase ventilation filter, which is this housing and hose right here that we pulled off the intake. So I'll start stripping it out, and we can do away with it. And one way in the back. Man, they got a lot of stuff crammed in this engine bay. That 6.7 is a big old motor. So there was 3 bolts holding this crankcase ventilation filter in. I think just 3. Well, it still feels pretty tight. Might have one more somewhere. I don't know if it's just kind of suction cupped in there or what. I need to issue a correction. There is 4 bolts holding in this crankcase ventilation filter. Not 3. And it's still good grief, is there more? There can't be more. Oh yeah, just needed a little. Needed just a little bit of persuasion. All right, and there that is. So now we've got that crankcase ventilation filter removed. What we're going to do is jump to our SPE kit here, our Speed Lab kit. So I opted for the internal catch can version. So that very back far bolts I was getting at, that flange right there, is the inlet to that CCV filter. So this little cheese grater piece, the internal catch can, is going to go in the very back with these bolts here. So if you can use this kit without doing the internal catch can, just a straight up fitting out the top with a hose to reroute it. But I opted for the internal catch can to kind of coalesce some of that oil mist out and drip back down into the engine instead of just blowing it out the hose. So how it's going to end up going is this internal catch can is going to go in first, and then this threaded flange is going to sandwich right on top of it like that, and then this 90 hose barb is going to thread right into there, and that's where we'll tie our hose into. So on that original crankcase ventilation filter, there's a drain in it for the oil to drain what oil it collects back into the engine. That was the flange up closer towards the front of the grill. So this is just a block off plate for it. And then where that filter routed back into the intake, right in front of the turbo, this cap is gonna plug that hole with a hose clamp there. So I'm gonna put our block off plate in first, which is gonna go right here. I'm gonna just dab a little bit of that oil to wipe on our O-ring. Trying to do this one-handed is a little difficult. But I think you get the point there. All right, so we got that greased up. And we'll just slip it right down into place. Now you'll take one of these little small bolts that came with the kit. So I tried to film it, but I really needed both my hands. But once you get a little bit of pressure with that little bolt on there, Allen head bolt, this thing will just pop right down and that O-ring will seat and it'll sit flush. That bolt right there is really just a keeper. So now we'll get to the back and get our catch can and reroute kit installed. I apologize in advance for the poor quality, but I'm trying to get back in here and film what I can. So we got our internal catch can in there, like I said, favoring towards the back side of the engine, and you can just tell by the way it's kind of sitting in there. You can tell by the way that it is that it's the catch can is facing more towards the back side of the motor. So now I'll grab our flange fitting with our threaded connection for that hose barb, and we'll drop it in right on top of it. So the more I look at and work with this kit, I'll tell you right now, this SPE Lab little, I guess that's a tiger or something, saber-tooth tiger maybe, I don't know. SPE Lab Auto Parts. Do not buy this kit. I'm realizing now that I was duped. There is a SPE Motorsports, and that is the kit you want. SPE Motorsports. Do not buy this. SPE Lab. And I'll tell you why. So, as I was getting that catch can in, internal catch can, and the little hose bung piece to go on top, I was trying to get the bolts in there, and I could only get one side at a time. So, and I ended up putting a set of calipers on it. The flange back there was too big for the size, excuse me, actually I believe it was too small. The bolt, essentially the two bolts were too close together, whereas Ford factory was, you know, a little bit further apart. So I had to take both those pieces off and drill the holes out just a little bit bigger so I could get those bolts to go in at the same time. But that right there got me looking, and I realized that was two different companies. I was looking for a particular one, and I guess they paid to get on Google ahead of SPE Motorsports, and I ended up buying that kit. So do not buy SPE Lab because it is Chinese junk. So as you can see, I'm still going to install this kit on the truck. Kind of because I don't really feel like I have an option at this point. I want this crankcase ventilation filter gone. I still want to be able to have my truck. So I'm kind of stuck putting this one on, which worst case, the worst thing I feel like that could happen is it leaks. And if it leaks a little bit, we're just about to hook a hose to it and run it to the back of the truck to blow freely anyways. So it's not a huge deal. I'll just have to keep an eye on it for a while and see if it's gonna work. I think it'll work. I don't think it'll leak. But if I had it to do over again, I just would not purchase from this company. I feel like they're playing off of SPE Motorsports' name and selling cheap crap. All right. Well, it's in there now. So while I'm finishing up the rest of this stuff, point out some of this scale and crap and junk down in these intakes. They're just caked up pretty good. We're gonna shoot some engine degreaser on this and take them outside and hose them down and do what we need to do to get them cleaned up. So I'm gonna take some of this spray-on engine degreaser and soak these intakes pretty good with this stuff. Try and get rid of what we can. Maybe they'll shine up nice for us. Might be slightly difficult to see, but we've got our reroute kit installed in the back where the hose ran down up under the brake booster, and then our oil drain block off plate hooked up right there. So I routed the other end of this hose behind the inner fender liner there and ran it down beside this wiring harness and just zip tied it in a couple locations. And then it puts out right here on the end, kind of right in line with the back of the driver door. So I'm kind of done cleaning on those intakes for now. Those things are caked up so bad. I'm just kind of tired of dealing with them. So the next step is we're going to carry on with our disaster prevention kit here. I think first off I'm going to blow. Now this is all brand new and it was sealed up in a box or whatever. I'm going to blow compressed air through all these hoses just to make sure nothing's in there. Then I'm gonna clean the top of that fuel metering valve where we're gonna kind of tie this kit into. So I'm up here dang near in the engine bay, and while we had to remove all that intake and pipes and little bits and pieces, the whole reason we had to do that was for access to this piece right here that this little electrical connector is hooked to. This is called the fuel metering valve, and this is where we're going to cut in our disaster prevention kit. We're going to have to pull this little valve out, which is a T25 Torx bolt right there and one on this side. So we're going to pull that out, put our disaster prevention kit in, and then this valve's going to sit right back on top of it to cut into that new filter. So I took a lot of time with some brake cleaner and paper towels and cleaned all this area up around this valve and this little manifold piece right here. Wiped all the dust and dirt off of it, because when we pull this out, we're going to be opening atmosphere to this high pressure fuel pump right here that this valve is sitting on top of, and we do not want to get not even one little piece of dirt in there. I'm going to pull this thing out of here, and then I'll get you back up close, because it's got a little screen inside this pump, and we're going to check that out, make sure there's no metal shavings or any crap in it. But I just can't film at the same time. I got to get me a better way to film in these tight spots. So here's where having the right tool sure comes in handy, because I tried every assortment I could of different wobble sockets, extensions. I had a Torx 1/4-inch socket, and I tried a nut driver with a T25 bit in it, and the only way I was able to get this forwardmost Torx bit bolt was with a Torx bit Allen key. So I would highly suggest having one of these to get this metering valve out, just because of the space. We got those bolts out of there. We can get this metering valve out of the inlet of this pump. All right, I got it pop free. I'll grab the camera and stick you down in here and show you what we're looking at. Okay, so here's our metering valve. There's the inlet to the pump, and there's that back bolt right there that we're having such a tough time, because apparently this is a coolant crossover pipe right here, and that made it really difficult to get a long Allen socket or a long Allen wrench, but a T25 Torx bit head is what you need. So here's our little valve. And as you can see, that little screen in there is very clean. So that means we don't have any CP4 pump issues. So we're good just to install our bypass kit and carry on. We'll be protected from any future failure to the injectors and the tank and the rest of that. We'll have to replace the pump if it ever fails on us, of course. So we've got our S&S bypass block here. So I'll go ahead and get the metering valve stuck down in here, and we've made sure this was nice and clean. So that's gonna snap down in there just like that. And what we'll go ahead and do is stick this hard to reach bolt back down in there before we get her shoved back in there. So these bolts are provided by S&S, and these are 4 millimeters. And they're just slightly longer to accommodate this bypass block. So I think I'll get a little bit of silicone lube to lube up these O-rings just a little bit. So I'll apply just the slightest amount of silicone lubricant to these O-rings. Now we've got our hole closed back up, so I feel a lot better about that. I tried my best to do that as quickly as possible because I didn't like the idea of that pump being exposed to atmosphere any longer than it had to be, considering how tight of tolerances this pump is. Just less chance for dirt and dust to have the ability to get into it. So here's what we now have: our bypass, the beginnings of our bypass kit installed. Let's see. So those little bolts are supposed to be torqued to 60 inch-pounds. I do not have a torque wrench that will go that low. That does correlate to 5 foot-pounds, correlates to 5 foot-pounds. But I don't have a torque wrench that'll go that low. So I got them Guten tight, not too tight. Be real careful with this stuff. But if it leaks, we'll just tighten it up a little bit more. So we're just about ready to begin installing our intake pieces. But before that, I am going to go to the back of the truck and just go ahead and pre-assemble this new filter block with the associated pieces before we go to installing it under the hood. Here's a little pack of hose barbs and O-rings for this filter block. So we'll go ahead and install these O-rings onto the hose barbs. I do like that these are O-ring fittings and not pipe threads like some of the cheaper kits. So this is really the return line filter. So I mean, these don't have to be torqued like ridiculous. Plus there's an O-ring in there. And this is right up top. So if you ever see it leaking, it's not like it's hidden, kind of like that metering valve. You really have to search for it. This is going to be sitting right up in plain view. So once you get these hose barbs in, go ahead and screw in these rubber little bumpers, isolators. Just hand tight. Let's see, then we'll get our bracket with the top of the housing, this facing up. Put our bolts in. I'm sure these are a size I don't have handy. I'm sure these don't have to be crazy tight either. So now this is all ready to be installed. For a 19 truck, such as mine, 17, 18, 19, you will need the longer bolt to go through here with the provided spacer. So the next piece of the puzzle will be this further back hard line with the sensor on it right here is coming from your secondary fuel filter through this rubber line. And if you follow this hard line out, it goes right back down to our metering valve, or to the pump anyhow. So what we need to do to continue cutting in our kit is there's these 2 tabs on the bottom of this quick connect. Pop it out, and then we'll pull this little soft jumper hose off. Then we'll grab our S&S, the other end of our S&S kit, kind of wrap this hose around your oil fill neck, and we'll come right down here and plug it in. And then don't forget to snap your safety down. Well, I'm glad to say that we're ready to start putting some of these parts back in that we've been pulling off. This thing's been apart for a better part of 2.5 days, and I'm ready to get it back together so I can give my dad his shot back. So I might not have mentioned it earlier, but make sure you put your electrical connector back on that metering valve. You'd hate to get this in and then forget about that, have to pull it back out to hook it back up. So I'm gonna snake this lower intake back down in here. I've got it cleaned up about the best I can. I might work on that upper plastic intake a little bit more, but I'm just ready to get some of this stuff going back in. All right, well, that wasn't too hard at all. Now maybe you noticed where since we deleted our crankcase ventilation filter, there's a rubber plug that went over the top of where the hose from that OEM filter went, and you just plug it in there and put a band clamp around it. It's all provided with that sorry old kit I got. I'm still mad about that. All right, so I remember there's an electrical connector right here drooping down for the throttle body. So we'll go ahead and get that hooked back up before we forget. Now we'll put this little funny spring clip clamp apparatus back on this hose here. What hose is this? From the intercooler. It just wraps around, and I'll tell you what, it might not be on all the way. There we go. Make sure that's nice and secure on there. Never dealt with anything like that before. That's kind of interesting. So I went and grabbed the bolts for our lower intake. Remember, it's 2 shorts and 1 long one. This 1 long one, you really can't get them mixed up because this side right here is clearly a lot longer for it to run down all the way to the bottom to that pedestal where it sits onto that. It bolts into the top of that coolant crossover tube, and you'd never be able to reach with these. And these 2 are right next to each other over more towards the passenger side of the vehicle. I'm opting to run these down with an impact. I gotta get me some better extensions. I get mad every time that happens and don't do anything about it. All right, that's plenty good. Next, we'll need to grab our EGR cooler pipe, outlet pipe, and the bolts. Let's see if we can snake this down through here. It's looking like there's really only one way for this to go back in here as well. That's with a little sensor facing more downward. Yeah, that's the only way it can go. I'll tell you what I hadn't gotten used to yet. I used to blast some rock and roll before I started trying to make YouTube videos. Now I don't really get to do that. I'm actually going to loosen this intake just a little bit to help us get these flanged surfaces mated up on this EGR cooler tube. Man, I'm glad this truck is going back together. Really kind of hate to do stuff like this to such a new truck, to a newest truck I've ever had, a 2019. But after looking around, I really think this is the best way to kind of protect my investment here with this. As often as these CP4s seem to fail, and then it almost seems like every truck I went and looked at before I bought this one was leaking oil. If it had over 100,000 miles, which I didn't look at any that didn't have over that many miles, we're always leaking out of the rear main seal, and that seems to be attributed to that crankcase ventilation filter. And then plus, I don't want that nasty junk going back in the engine. That just doesn't seem like the best option. All right, I believe that to be plenty tight. We'll tighten this lower intake back up. Make sure we got this double flange little piece of pipe here mounted back up appropriately. All right. There's two band clamps on a rubber boot down here that connect this lower intake to the inlet of the turbo. So just make sure you tighten that back up. Okay, those are nice and tight and sealed all the way around. So there's a little sensor connected to this EGR cooler tube that hooks to our lower intake manifold there. So don't forget to secure it and plug it back into its associated connector. So the next thing I'm going to do is I went ahead and got this fuel filter little holder bowl set back in here. I'm gonna go ahead and work on getting it tightened down. Don't forget that there's the set of fuel lines. There's a bracket holding the fuel lines going to and from the high pressure fuel pump that also tie into this little fuel filter holder bowl for support. Got our little fuel bowl canister holder back in there. So now I think I'm gonna put this turbo pipe back in here, hot side of the intercooler. Let's see if I can't snake this down in here. Maybe I should get this side on first. Next, I think I'd like to try and snake this upper intake manifold back into place. Now that that's in, I'm going to work on getting all these bolts tightened down. I'll spare you the pain of watching me try that. Now we're going to install this filter block into the truck. And so what I've done is popped up this little cover piece here. There was a plastic clip right there. Now we had that popped out so we could get this to move, to get our hands down in there, taking this upper air intake off. But now I've replaced that with a bolt, the long bolt provided from S&S with a washer. It's a 5mm Allen head bolt. So you grab your filter block, your nylon lock nut, and the spacer. So you'll need this longer bolt and the spacer for the 17, 18, and 19 trucks, which this being the 19, we need it. So put the spacer on there first. Slide the filter head on there, then we'll take our nylon lock nut and get it started. All right, got that good and tight. Now we can snap our piece back down. So next on the list is this return line right here. It's got a white quick connect on it. Just squeeze the tabs and should pop out. It'll pop it off. Now for this kit, what we're gonna need to do, see if we can't twist it. Then we'll get our provided hose with the blue and the black quick connect on it. We're going to hook the black to the return line coming from the injectors. Then we'll route our new hose around this little tank. Hook it to our filter head. Then we'll take our other S&S provided hose, connect it, damn, all right, never mind. Okay, so I had to take a heat gun to heat this joint up right here so I could rotate this. It's kind of a 45 quick connect fitting here, so I had to heat it up just a little bit to be able to rotate it around roughly 180 degrees, basically backwards, so it would be facing out. And how I'm gonna route it is kind of right through up under this other piece from the S&S kit and loop it right back in to the filter head. So that's all done. And now finally, we're basically back to fuel filter time. I'm gonna drop down our factory secondary fuel filter. It's gonna go right back in how it used to, except for the fact that now we're gonna hook the S&S back up on that middle line. Which it's a blue connector, and the factory head used to be a blue connector as well, so that's nice. That's all it is to it. Put a little lube on this O-ring here. And now this is they provided a Donaldson filter. It's been around. I'll give you the part number P550943. And there we have it. So we're in the home stretch here. Putting the air cleaner hose back on. Let's see if I can't wiggle that in there. Put our little holder. Tighten this up. We'll be ready to prime the fuel system and see if she runs. All right, I primed the fuel system. Now let's hope this baby fires off. Used to, when I'd crack this cap, it would almost kind of want to pop off a little bit at idle, and I'm thinking that was because of that crankcase vent filter, so let's see if it still does it. Nope, not at all. So that tells me there's a lot less back pressure on this system than it used to be, which is exactly what I was going for. We've got no leaks, no codes. She's running good. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this one, guys. That was quite a bit of work, and that was my first time working under the hood on this 6.7, any serious kind of work. I mean, we changed the oil and fuel filters and stuff like that. But so it took me a little longer than probably would most folks if you know, fooled around under there before. I'm going to keep my eye, make sure there's no leaks. I don't see any yet. I looked over it pretty good when we first got it cranked up. Drove it here, still haven't seen any, but I'll keep an eye on that. While I was on the way home, I did notice I threw a code, and I also noticed that my pressure, the turbo, the gauge showing you your boost pressure, was stuck at 40. So I think, and I remember when I was washing that thing, I was trying to clean all that soot out of that plastic upper intake, and I washed all that crap right into that sensor. So I did go back, pull that off, tried to clean it out with some MAF, mass airflow sensor cleaner. Apparently that didn't help. I probably screwed it up. So I got another one of those on order. I'm sure that's what the engine code is about. So the truck feels a little sluggish right now, but I think that'll fix it right up. So if that's all we did from all that messing around under the hood, I'm okay with that. I'll know next time. Well, guys, if you stuck around this long, I sure do appreciate it. Let me know down in the comments what you want to see me work on next. If you would, please consider liking and subscribing. And join us again next time, because ain't no telling what we're going to be working on. Appreciate it. Have a blessed day.